Hey everybody, welcome back to Turn by Turn, episode number 4. Hopefully by now you're hooked. Today we are going to be talking about Fire Emblem Sacred Stones for the Game Boy Advance. Alex, what is your first experience with Sacred Stones?
Sure. My first experience with Sacred Stones was that I'd only played Path of Radiance before this one. So this was my second Fire Emblem game, and I didn't fully know what to expect. I think I got it as like a Christmas gift or something, and I played it when I was 10, 11, and really, really loved it. But sometimes games just don't click with you. So I didn't actually finish it the first time I tried to play through it. And I also didn't read any of the dialogue because I was young and just didn't... it was just too much, so I just skipped it. So I really didn't get a very good idea of what was happening. And then I forget why, but I had to be at my grandparents' house for a pretty, not a super long time, but like my parents were going on the trip and for work, and I had to stay with them for like a week. And I brought Sacred Stones. And I don't know why that game just clicked with me in that environment a lot more. So anytime that I think of my grandparents' house, I think of hanging out and playing Sacred Stones for a really long time. And that's really where I fell in love with that game. What about you?
So my experience from Sacred Stones is actually coming from you recommending it. So I had played the first Fire Emblem Game Boy Advance game and played through it and had a lot of fun.
First American one.
Yes, the first American one. Good point. And I had finished it, and I had thought the next one was for the GameCube, which, as we've talked about on previous podcasts, is very hard to acquire without a very large bag of money. So I was talking to you about it, and you had recommended that I play Sacred Stones, so I started playing it, and I got hooked pretty quick on it. The plot pulls you in pretty quick, if I remember correctly. I played this not too long ago, so it pulls you in pretty quick because there's a lot happening. And I remember with my job, I'm required to do on-call maintenance fixing of things that break over the weekend. And at the facility I work at, all the power went out. A car had hit a phone line, so I was sitting in my office in the dark, waiting for something to happen, playing Sacred Stones. And then I got called away to go fix something. And I remember being so disappointed that I wasn't going to get to continue playing because I had just reached the point in the game where you're starting to get some of the more interesting characters, some of the wizards and like mercenaries, where you take over Ephraim's army for a few turns. And I remember just being like crushed that I was like, I have to go work. Like there's games to be played. That is my like beginning experience playing the game.
I like it a lot. So on our notes here, we wrote, why should you play this game? I think that you should play Sacred Stones because it's got a great plot, a great cast of characters. The combat is just fun. It's one of the only Fire Emblem games that allow you to grind, because there's an overworld, and eventually you unlock the Tower of Volney, which is where you can go to just fight as much as you want and grind your characters up. And I really like that in RPGs as well, the ability to just, outside of the plot, just mess around, try some different, party, what's the word I'm looking for?
Configurations.
Yeah. And just see what works and what doesn't. So I really liked that. Yeah. Why do you think they should play it?
I think I would recommend it because it feels like it has a stronger emotional core than a lot of these games do. I feel like a lot of the games are about like conquering like different lands, but Sacred Stones is more delves deeper into like a smaller story of like twins trying to like save their friend from evil forces. Like the big bad guy of the game has taken over their friend Lyon, and the game is basically them trying to not give up on their friend, which I think creates like a nice little emotional core for these games that usually tend to be like, become the king of this kingdom that you're already going to become king of anyway.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I think that segues us into what the plot of the game is. So, still no spoilers. I've tried to the most broad thing I could find that sums up the plot is that it focuses on royal twins Ephraim and Erica as they investigate why a longtime ally has chosen to invade their nation's borders, and also the sudden appearance of monsters all over the continent of Magville, in which they inhabit. That is the most broad sense of it. Do you want to add anything to that?
So I think, as far as the plot goes, a lot. It's a very broad game where you're dealing with multiple kingdoms. I feel like in a lot of like similar games, it's usually like Kingdom A and Kingdom B are fighting, but in Sacred Stones, you get Kingdom C, D, E, and F also involved. So it becomes like the whole world is sort of falling apart. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. And especially when I was younger, it was definitely hard to keep all of them separate. And I think I do a lot better now. But for a kid, it was a lot to, like, there's political things that happen, and, there's people that it's like, oh, I would totally help you out, like, if I could. And as a kid, I'm like, well, why can't you? And the reason being is more of, well, I have obligations and da da da, and there's treaties. But as a kid, I'm like, well, I'm your friend. We're friends. You help me out.
Yeah, I think it's very adult in its plot. Compare, I'm comparing it to a lot of things, to other games, but it feels like there's a lot of language in it that you wouldn't normally hear in games, perhaps tailored towards a younger audience. Because there is talk of politics and, oh well, I have to do this because it's the way my like kingdom always reacts.
For
So there's
sure.
like a political intrigue, like makes it even deeper of a game.
Yeah, I think so. And that's also that this one obviously has permadeath, so that's definitely something to always take into account as well. That it does up the difficulty of it. And I've said on previous episodes that the way I prefer to play Fire Emblem is um, sometimes if it's optional, I usually won't do permadeath. I still think it adds weight to your decisions, though. But when in the games with permadeath, I always reset to save my party.
Mm-hmm. That's where we differ because I think I've just been like natured into it where I just started, if I lost somebody I wouldn't go back. So I would end up with like a really strong core of say like 5 to 6 characters, and the rest would be like a revolving door of like when I would lose them. And some of them would hurt really bad because you'd lose really strong characters like super early. Like I remember I had like several of the early on barbarians, like Garcia and his son Ross, and I lost them like 2 battles in, but they
Oh
were some of my
man.
strongest units at the time. So like maybe it's almost like a masochist thing where I like hold my feet against the fire just to see if I can do it.
Yeah, I can't imagine losing those guys that early.
But it makes you kind of fall in love with other characters because you're sometimes left with some pretty weak stuff, and then you're like forced to think harder and really be cautious about where you're put. Like, oh, I can't put Erica here because I will lose her, and I cannot lose Erica.
Yeah, I definitely like the weight that it adds to your decisions. So now I think we're going to move into talking about characters more. not like a hard spoiler warning, but we're going to talk about recruitable characters and things. Just keep that in mind. Is there any character that really stood out to you as like a favorite, or maybe you have a couple favorites?
Yes. If you have followed me on Twitter at all, you know that my favorite character in the entire game is Loot. You'd say magician.
Mage.
Mage. I ended up with Erica and Seth and Loot for several battles in a row because I kept losing everybody else. Loot is a very, very powerful mage if you work on her properly. So since I only had those 3 characters, they all got very strong very quickly. And I got the promotional item for her, and I promoted her to... I can never remember what the promotional items are.
Master Seal?
Mm-hmm. So I got Loot's Master Seal, and I promoted her to the Mage Knight, which is... she gets promoted and she gets a horse. And that is my preferred upgrade to the Master Mage, I believe it is.
Sage.
Sage, yes. So I chose to do the Mage Knight rather than the Sage, and I think that was the right move because it gives you the magic element and it gives you really great movement. She can move far faster than any of the other mage characters in the game. You get a mage later on in the game named Sayla, who is similar to Pent in the original Game Boy Advanced game. And his movement is very slow because he's not mounted. So he's a strong character, but it takes him a while to get to the actual battle. Loot's movement was so strong that she could like reach the battle in the first turn. To the point where like I'd have her go out, take out a bunch of people, and then have to have her retreat after she'd gotten hit a couple of times. What's a character that you like, Alec?
Well, for the early game, Seth is one of the most broken characters in the whole genre. He is so powerful, and most of the time, Fire Emblem gives you what we stereotypically call, or there's different stereotypes in Fire Emblem. One of them is a Jagan stereotype, named after the character Jagan in the very first game. This is typically a paladin class, a guy on a horse, that is way more powerful than the rest of your units, but when you level him up, he doesn't get very good stats. He doesn't grow very well. So the point is that you use this character as sort of your crutch in the early game to get you through some of the hard stuff if you have to, and then you sort of wean yourself off of them as your other characters start to catch up. Seth is that, but he doesn't have bad stat growth. He just is amazing and stays amazing through the whole thing.
It always annoyed me that he was so strong, because like you'd go to farm somebody else and you'd get him anywhere near the battle, and then like half of the villains are gone by the time it's your turn again. So I almost it annoyed me how strong he was, because it like prohibited raising other characters up.
Yeah, it's hard to set up kills with him because he doubles pretty much everything, and he does so much damage that just nothing can survive a round of combat with him.
Which is great late game, but when you're trying to create a very well-rounded team, it gets very annoying very quickly that he's able to defeat so many enemies. So I felt like he defeated more enemies when it wasn't his turn than when it was.
So in the early game, the way I handle that is I take away Seth's sword so that he can be attacked, and he doesn't lose much health, obviously, but he won't be attacking back either, so he doesn't take all the kills from all of my weaker units.
That actually makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the game, I was so on board with everything he wanted to do.
Oh, yeah. Another of my favorite, I'm just kind of going in order of when you recruit them. I thought Colm, the thief, was pretty cool. I made him, I think, an assassin the first time, which seems to be not nearly as good as the rogue, I think is the other one. But the assassin has a skill that gives him a very small chance, and I mean it is very small, to one-hit kill anything. And that was so much fun, crossing my fingers and hoping that was going to happen. And it very seldomly did. But when it did, it was really cool.
I lost him first fight, so I don't have a lot of experience with him.
I see.
Because when you get him, he starts off with like 8 HP. So like
Yes.
he's almost like one hit, like immediately, along with the girl that's like stuck hanging out with him.
Nimai. I don't know how you say her name exactly, but
Yeah.
Nami. Yeah, she is pretty squishy too.
Compared to other rosters on Fire Emblem, I felt like there were a lot of like kind of cannon fodder characters. Maybe it's
there
just
are a lot of squishies, yeah.
my version of how I've been playing them. Obviously, it doesn't help with that. It felt like if you look at the character list, like some of them don't even like stick out because they kind of die so quick.
That obviously wasn't my experience, but
I'll have to go back and play again with like resetting and like getting some more experience with these, like some of the other characters. But another character that I really liked was Ennis. Normally I'm not really impressed with archers in these style of games because it feels like the ranged attacks is useful, but it feels like they never do very much damage. I felt the opposite with Ennis. I felt like he does a very good job at like his attacks always do like a fair amount of damage. Like it's not like three or four damage per arrow. Like it felt like you could get up to like a higher amount, like closer to like 30,
for sure.
which is very, very rare.
I had mixed feelings on him. And it was a little weird. So this is a little spoilery territory, but almost every character it felt like was some sort of royal. And I know that's not true looking back at it, but there's a lot of royalty in this game. For me, it just got to the point where after like the third or fourth reveal of that, I was like really over it.
I think that plays into the like the grander scheme of all the kingdoms.
Another of my favorites was Joshua. That was sort of a similar thing that he reveals he's a prince, just like Ennis does. Um, but I forget who else is a royal. I think La Rochelle is a royal.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if Natasha was, but it just got to the point where like I can't even tell you who all's royal anymore. But yeah, Joshua I liked, though, at least in playstyle. His design's great. Like the hat's awesome.
That's a great hat.
And his animations were great. But I like Joshua because I tend to like those sword characters that can be a tank because they dodge a lot. I just like the thrill of that, I think. Putting somebody on the front lines that, yeah, he has less health than my guy with all the armor, but if nobody hits him, then it's fine. I don't know if you liked doing that or if you had the character.
Joshua was one I kept around for quite a while, and it hurt pretty bad when I lost him. He was really strong on my crew, so there was one of the battles where you're bottlenecked, and I was feeling a little brassy, I guess, so I sent him in one direction and basically everybody else the other direction. It played out exactly as you'd think it would.
Yeah.
He survived like 10 turns and then couldn't swing it anymore. Literally. His sword was down.
Oh.
So that one really hurt. Losing Garrick really hurt. Losing Dozla really hurt. Some of them really hurt.
I would imagine. Still, I'm just going in order on the character sheet I have to each one I find interesting. Orson. And I know we talked about this a little bit off camera, but Orson is a playable character you get that joins your party. He's one of Ephraim's trust. He betrays you in the plot because the invading empire, Grado, tells him that they can revive his dead wife. And so he puts that over his loyalty to you and betrays you. And this is the only game like this I could think of that you get a playable character and then lose them due to plot reasons. They're just taken away from you and you have to fight them. The only thing I can think of that is comparable in Fire Emblem at all is in Fire Emblem Fates, you can lose one of your characters if you have not like A rank supported with them. But if you've done that, then you're fine. And there's just a check that comes along. But none of, like, Orson, there's nothing you can do to get him to rejoin you. I definitely tried. I deployed every character on that map and made sure they didn't have the talk command with him. And I don't remember if Ephraim does or not, but it doesn't change anything. He just leaves you. And that really, like, that'll always stick with me. And I'll always remember Orson, because I just remember the feeling of that betrayal and subverting, I guess, some of the genre's patterns so hard.
He's a really strong unit in that first battle with Ephraim.
Mm-hmm.
When you switch squads, and he was my strongest unit, and I had lost Ford, so it was just Kyle, Orson, and Ephraim for the whole battle. I just let Orson go to town. Was really disappointed when I lost him, because I had farmed up him more than anybody else, so he got all the experience for that battle, basically. And the other two were just lucky to be alive.
Yeah, definitely. I think I had a similar experience, because, again, at this point, the only paladin you've had is Seth. You probably have not gotten Franz up to a high enough level to promote. When you get Orson, it's like, haha, I have another Seth. And so you kind of know what that means. And then to have that taken away from you and used against you is like, oh no.
Yes, and then like the next couple of characters that you unlock are like squishy, as you were saying.
Yeah, you get the ones in order after him are like Tana, who's a Pegasus Knight, and then you get Amelia, who's just a child wearing armor. And then you get Ennie's the guy with a bow. So yeah.
In general, I'm very leery of I feel like I've never had good luck with the Pegasus Knights.
Same.
I feel like they're like one hit every single time. And I remember once I finally, like later on in Sacred Stones, like near the end, I decided to do some resetting, because I think I lost Seth in like a freak accident. I had Serene, and I think she lasted like a couple battles, and that felt like huge that she was able to survive so long.
How do you feel about the Wyvern Knights, like Cormag?
Cormag I didn't find.
Okay. If I remember right, and I can check this since I've got the list up, I believe I didn't find him my first time either.
Like, he's a part of the plot. Like, he's the brother of someone that you fight.
Yes.
One of the bad guys.
Glenn.
And I remember being like seeing him on the list and being like, oh, great. Like, I'm going to be able to get this character pretty soon. He's going to want some sort of revenge. And it just never turned up to get him, because I felt like in the story, they build up that he's going to run into you in like one of the future battles. Like, I kept looking out for him, and it just never happened. And then I got Rennick, who's like the next character you find. I felt like the story built it up that he was going to like purposefully run into your group.
Mm-hmm.
But that is very much not the case.
So I was actually wrong about this, so I'm glad I fact-checked myself. When you're playing Sacred Stones, you come to a point in the plot that Erica and Ephraim are going to go their separate ways for a little bit and do different things. And you have to choose who you're going with. And that will determine for the next couple of levels what you're playing. I thought that Cormag was actually locked to Erica's route. And that is actually not the case. It seems like if you show he does if you're playing it. Who did you go with? I don't remember.
Oh, I go with Erica.
For some reason I feel like I remembered playing, maybe it's Ephraim. I don't remember. One of the two, he shows himself to you a lot more easily, and the other you have to do some more, jump through some more hoops to find him.
Like I've said in other podcasts, I'm not the strongest like gamer. If there's like all these like, this person has to talk to this person and then go to the store and buy a potion to give to this person to unlock this person, I won't just figure that out on my own. So unless I'm like reading the walkthrough of how to unlock this person, I'm not going to get them.
They don't give you a whole lot of hints. You just kind of got to right place, right time it.
Yeah, I remember in Shining Force, there's a character that's hiding in a bush. Years later, I found out that, oh yeah, if you click on this bush, you get this other character. Having my mind blown, because like I never would have thought of it. And then I was talking to some other people about it, and they were like, oh yeah, how did you miss the bush? And I was like, how did you find the bush?
I had the same experience Daniel had. That the only thing that sets this bush apart is that there's a flower on it. And it is apparently, as far as I know, the only time that flower bush model shows up in the entire game, are you just it's close to the end of the game. You've been seeing bushes for 30 hours at that point. Like, at what point do you stop checking the bushes, you know? At what point do you start tuning them out?
Yeah. So if it's not like kind of obvious, or I'm not specifically looking for it, I'm gonna miss it. I'm just not that strong of a gamer yet. And I'll get there.
To jump back in the character list just a little bit, my favorite character in the entire game is actually, and I never know how to say it, Ewan or Iwan.
Really?
Yes. I got him, and I liked that he had the connection with Selah, the sage you find, because Ewan is his student. And when you find Ewan, if you haven't played the game, Ewan's class is pupil. So he's like even worse than a regular mage. I thought this was cool because I like those child characters that you can kind of build up into powerhouses. But I had an amazing occurrence with Ewan in that I had played one level for a really long time, and I forget what mistake I made. Like, I think some reinforcements showed up, and I didn't move Ewan. And so he was in range of 3 cavaliers, just horsemen with spears and swords. And I was like, well, there's my reset. Like, the second that they moved towards him and could hit him, I was like, okay, yeah, that's just it. Because he has like 7 HP or something, and each of them do like 11 damage, and they double him. So I was like, well, this is it. But I'll watch the animation of my death before I shut my Game Boy off. And what ended up happening was only 2 of them could attack him, just based on like where he was positioned. So the first one attacks him and misses, and then he hits back, and then the second attack comes and it misses too. So I'm like, okay, they had it was like 80% hit chances. So I was like, well, the chances of that are not very good, but fine. So then the second cavalier runs up to him and attacks him and misses. And then he gets a critical and kills the second cavalier. And I'm like, oh, that was really bad, because all he had to do was dodge one more time and then he'd survive. But now he's got to dodge 2 more. So the third and last cavalier comes up and he misses the first hit, and then Ewan criticals him too and kills him. And I was like, okay, Ewan A doesn't want to die, and B is amazing and can be on my team for as long as he wants.
I had the exact opposite experience. I had Ewan, and I think he has like a blaze spell or like a fire spell.
Fire, yeah.
Fire, and he did like 6 damage, and I thought it was so sad. I think I let him die.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, because I had already, you have to realize my squads are a lot smaller than like your normal like 12 units.
Yeah.
So my squads are basically like strike teams. Like, give me another character that's doing like six damage at a time. Like, I don't have time for that. Isn't that terrible?
That is awful.
And I feel like it's awful, but I'm not sure how much I regret it, which might even be more awful.
Yes. Continuing through the character list before I cry. No. The next one that really was amazing to me was Dussel, the Great Knight, the super armored guy on a horse.
Yes, I'm a big fan of this character.
Yeah, I think when Daniel was playing it, we were talking some, and I told him that Dussel is the only, as far as I know, he is the only character in a Fire Emblem game that from the time you recruit him to the final boss, he can survive a round of combat with the final boss. He is just amazing. I don't have that much more to say about him other than it's essentially like in a game that has already given you Seth, at the end of the game, they give you another one. The next one that made an impression on me was Knoll. Did you use Knoll at all?
I wanted to, because I like the enemy magic spells, and Null is, as I understand, is basically one of the only dark magic users on available to you. So
You could promote Ewan to be a dark magic user as well, but I guess you wouldn't know that.
I didn't know about that, but that was just about when I had started resetting, because like I knew that I needed a decent amount of people with which to win the game. He would just die so quick. I would try to protect him, like I'd keep him at a distance. I would keep Ephraim as like a human shield for him, and like I just could not keep him alive long enough to make it worthwhile.
He's really slow, which does not help. Like his speed stat that determines if you double enemies or get doubled by enemies is real bad.
Yeah, in that battle that you enter, little spoiler, I guess, when you're on Erica's route, you enter a battle, and then like halfway through the battle, Ephraim, Dusel, and Noel show up. There's enemies coming in a couple of different directions, and it's really hard to keep him alive. So I remember restarting the battle a couple of times, and I just couldn't keep him alive.
It is very difficult, but I liked that if you promote him, your two options are Druid, which that is the way to go. If you use Null, you like everybody, you have two options to promote him into. One of those is Druid, which, as I understand it, is objectively the way to go. The stat growths for Druids are just way better than the alternative, which is Summoner. So Summoner has essentially worse stats all around, as far as I know, but you get the added command of Summon, and you can summon a zombie, which you control. And I thought that was so cool. So I always make him a Summoner anyway. And the zombie's not particularly good. I mean, it is absolute fodder. It has like 10 HP, barely does any damage. But just the idea of being able to summon a monster and control it is so cool.
That is
go ahead.
No, it's just hearing about this is like breaking my heart that I couldn't keep him alive. Because I did reset like 2 or 3 times just trying to keep him specifically alive, and I just couldn't keep him without significant effort in like pacing issues. Because like a zombie, that'd be like a cool like shield to help with his like lower HP issues.
Yes, it is not super effective.
No? Okay.
Because, I mean, the zombie's so fodder that an enemy can pretty much one-round him in combat, and then if there's one more enemy, they can just go stand where that zombie was standing and then attack you. But it was just cool, and you get some experience points for summoning the zombie.
See, that is cool. I like that. If I do another playthrough, I'll focus on trying to make that happen.
It's just one of those things that it doesn't have a lot of utility, but just the fact that I can do it and it's different is neat.
Yeah, it's a cool mechanic that like no other character has that. So
the last character that you get that really moved me is Myrrh. Did you use Myrrh at all?
Yes, and I did a little research on this character because I knew she was more involved, and it like really changed how I played a lot of my closing battles, knowing that you can only use her basically 50 times and then that's it.
Yes.
Which is a bummer because she is such a cool character, and like the graphics of her turning into the dragon are just marvelous.
For if you're listening to this episode and you haven't played this game, Myrrh is a little girl that joins you, and she's got kind of like big dragon wings. And you eventually find her Dragonstone, which you'll be familiar with if you've played some of the other Fire Emblem games. And she can turn into, she's called a Manakete, and she can turn into a dragon, which looks horrifying. The graphics, I agree, were really amazing on her dragon transformation. But the drawback is you get her close to the end of the game, and I think she's level 1, but she's still amazing. And you can only use that attack 50 times, because that's how many times the Dragonstone has uses, and you can't get another one, as far as I know. You really have to budget your uses of the Dragonstone. I also have mixed feelings about that. It makes it feel really important and powerful. But if you listen to another of our episodes called Elements of an RPG, I talk about in Zelda Breath of the Wild, I don't like being limited so much on weapon uses in that game. And this touches on that a little bit. in that it's a really cool thing, but it is dampened a little bit for me by the fact that I'm told you can use this a total of 50 times and that's it.
So I had Loot, and I had her with the Eclipse spell, which would one-hit boss characters. And then I had Myrrh with her attack, would also one-hit boss characters. So that's actually how I beat the game. I had Loot sacrifice on the final boss using Eclipse, and then that wiped the final boss, basically all the way out. And then I used Myrrh to finish him, and that's how I beat the game.
I love that you get stories like that with permadeath, with like Lute sacrificing herself against the final boss to win the campaign. That's really amazing and makes it really memorable. Whereas if you don't have something like permadeath, then Lute sacrificed herself and then walked it off.
But like, I was like really sad that I had to sacrifice her in order to beat it, because that final battle like isn't like crazy hard, but like, or Mortis,
the Demon King,
like basically can one hit anyone on your squad. So like, I got Loot, my heavy hitter, I got her close, figuring that she'd be able to one hit it like all the other bosses that I had run into, and she got it like all the way there. And I was like, do I reset or do I just keep going? I was like, her sacrifice will not be in vain. And then Myrrh ended up being my champion.
That's awesome. And I think that's a good segue too, to after you finish the game. I love what they did. Most Fire Emblem games do not have a post game, but this one does. Did you do that at all?
What?
Are you aware of it?
I guess not.
So I'll describe it a little bit. After you get to play what's called Creature Campaign. And this tower that you've been grinding in, I forget if it opens up another area. Let's see, I can look real fast. Yeah, it does. It opens up the Lagdo Ruins as well, as the Tower of Volney, which you already have. And it is really, really hard to beat the Tower of Volney. It's like 10 floors. It just gets harder every single floor. If you can back out at the beginning of every single floor, but if you get high enough, you get rewards, and if you do things enough, you get rewards. I knew this as well, I think, because I looked stuff up beforehand. So I was also trying to balance my 50 uses of Myrrh's Dragonstone with this campaign in mind, because it gets really hard. As I've said in several past episodes, and this one as well, I think, my favorite rewards for struggling in games is characters. And that is what the reward is if you struggle through this brutally difficult creature campaign. So Daniel, did you know any of that?
I did not know any of that.
Yeah, so there's different ones, and I can go down the list of a couple of them about how you actually recruit them. So if you beat like floor 3 on the Tower of Volney, one of the villains from the game, Kalek, will join you. And he doesn't have any supports, and he doesn't say anything, but you can still use him in the game. He'll join your roster. And there's tons of different ones, like Reeve is a evil priest you fight against. And I just checked, and you get him by beating floor 7 on the Tower of Volney. And so you just keep going, and eventually you can get Glenn if you want to, the Wyvern Lord that you have to fight. You can get Orson back. He'll rejoin you. You can get Valter, who is one of my favorite villains from Fire Emblem, who is the leader of sort of the Wyvern Lords that is just this terrible person. You can get Erica and Ephraim's father. And then the final reward is if you beat the ruins, which as I understand it is harder than the Tower of Volney. If you beat the ruins all the way through 3 times, you get Lyon, the main villain of the game, and he will join your party. So there's not a lot to do with Lyon at that point, considering he's the final unlock, but it's still, to me, pretty worth it just to do it. Like that is a great reward for a really hard challenge, just to let you take control of Lyon and play around with him. You also, when you get Lyon, he's a necromancer. that is the only necromancer in the game. So he actually has a specific class that is unique to him.
That is awesome. That would be worth getting.
I agree. And reading weird trivia, it says too that in Japan they made Lyon's growths like even worse. So he's like not very usable. Some of them are 10%, and that means when I say growths, I mean that when you level up, your growth is your chance to increase a stat. So if you have 10% growths across the board, every time you level up, your speed has a 10% chance of getting 1 skill point. Your HP, you have a 10% chance of getting 1 more HP, etc. So they made him just awful. I thought that was kind of funny. At least the American version made him more usable.
One thing that surprised me as far as like the characters go is I felt like they built up Walter to be a very like pivotal like piece in all of this, and I felt like he is not.
So Walter, the reason he sticks out to me is that Fire Emblem tries to be, and I'll debate that a little more in the later games, but in the earlier games at least, they try to be pretty realistic to real world situations. If you're at war with another nation, typically it's not because that other nation is just evil. It's because that other nation and your nation have differing ideals and have come into conflict because of some outside circumstance that's sort of forcing it. Much like the real world, you know, we go to war with people. Not everybody that fights on the opposite side from you is a terrible person. Some of them are just there for the same reasons you are, swept along, doing what they think is right. Walter is an exception to this. Walter is actually just evil. And because that's not the norm in Fire Emblem, it's very different. It just sticks out a lot more because that's not the norm. He just does things because he wants people to suffer, and he enjoys seeing that. And I don't know why that makes him one of my favorites. I think that combined with his design and that he rides his wyvern around and it looks super cool. Like everything about him just looks super cool.
All right, how about on that happy note, we take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm David.
And I'm Kate.
And we're the hosts of another Zelda podcast.
There are so many good podcasts out there, and some of them in particular concern The Legend of Zelda.
That's right, Kate, and we are another one of them. That is actually the name of our show, Another Zelda Podcast.
And in our show in particular, we talk about some of our favorite dungeons, characters, boss battles. We have top 10 lists.
Yeah, we do deep dives on game design and production aspects of the different Zelda games.
And we talk about our own experiences. We do some review episodes, talk about our challenges, our struggles, and our victories.
That's right. You know, really just almost anything that has to do with Zelda, we like to talk about it. A new episode comes out every other Friday, and you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and YouTube.
And you can also check out our episodes on our website, anotherzeldapodcast.com.
That's right. All right, we will see you there.
Okay, bye.
Hi, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Mike.
And we are brothers-in-law. We both love beer and are amateur home brewers.
Wait, so does that make us brothers-in-law?
I believe so.
Every episode, we will talk about aspects of beer and home brewing.
But nothing super technical because we're learning this too.
So join us as we sit down together and dive into something beer-related.
Whether it's a little field research, tasting a certain beer style, or beers from a specific brewery.
Talk about our experiences brewing beer at home, including our own solo brews, as well as themed competitions we'll set up along the way.
We will also talk about some of our favorite aspects of brewing, like hops, extra ingredients, building our brew cave, and more. And of course, our own misadventures that have happened along the way.
So, if you like beer, are home brewing already,
or if you have an interest in home brewing and don't know where to start,
join us on Brothers-in-Law Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And make sure to follow us on Twitter @Brothers-in-Law and check out our website, brothersinlaw.com.
Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, we're back from our break, and now we're going to get into some of the themes of the game. Alex, what are some of the themes that you picked up on?
All right, so biggest theme, or one of the most notorious themes, I brought up to you off camera and we discussed a little bit. one of the most notorious ones that this game is aged for, to the point that people that haven't played it but know the other Fire Emblem games kind of know it for, is the weird relationship between Ephraim and Erica. There's little jokes that they sort of have a thing. And I asked Daniel while he was playing, or after he finished, if he picked up on that at all, and his answer was not really. So I looked up some of the reasons for where this came from. And some of the reasons are that depending on your supports with everybody, people get different endings. If you have Erica and Ephraim as a supported at the ending, they are labeled as the Restoration King and Queen. Now, Intelligent Systems, I fully agree with, probably meant that as a form of like equal rulership. But a lot of people were like, oh, they got married. And that's why they're the king and queen. And I don't think that that is what was being implied there. But there are some other weird things with like them stroking each other's faces, and they're just a little bit too close. And if you're still not sold on any of that being a thing, Erica and Ephraim have unique weapons. And in most Fire Emblem games, your lord will get a unique weapon. But Erica and Ephraim's unique weapons are called Siegmund and Sieglinde. And that's their sword and spear. Those are actually named after the two main characters of the German play. I'm going to butcher this so hard. Die Walkür. I don't know much about the German language, so please forgive me. Siegmund and Sieglinde in that play are twins who are in love with each other. There's also a little bit of that nod. I told Daniel, too, that they lean into this a lot more now with the mobile game Fire Emblem Heroes. They still make jokes about this by doing things like putting them on like the Valentine's Day banner or something at the same time, where they get Valentine's Day alternate costumes and just different things that they sort of lean into with that. And I mean, it's not completely out of place either in the fantasy setting. We know that this has happened throughout real history and through other things. Another big example that's got very popular was Game of Thrones. Definitely had that going on with Jaime Lannister and Cersei Lannister. I was having to think back because I really have not thought about Game of Thrones since it ended. But yeah, that's a theme that kind of it's half joking, but I also think that like they didn't fully shy away from it either. So it's kind of it's there if you want it to be there, and if you don't, then it's very easily hand wavable. Daniel, do you want to comment on that some?
In my brain, that's not the case. And actually, this is sort of like a good point for Fire Emblem fans out there. If you find a character that you really enjoy, always look up their backstory, because what you get in the game versus what like is in like the fandom, like Wikipedia versions of these things, is like very fascinating. And I had mentioned earlier in the episode that I liked the character Lute, and you could like look up her profile all about her character, and like each character has like multiple like alternate endings where like, oh well, if this character lives, they get married. It has like that very like Shakespeare quality of like, oh, it's a comedy, they all get married at the end, or they're all dead at the end. So like highly encourage you to check out the Wikipedia version for Fire Emblem and see like where your favorite character ends up, or like what ends up happening to them. Because they're either like, some of them are super interesting or other ones are really sad. Probably wouldn't get most of that just by playing the game.
Yeah. There's also obviously there's the support mechanics. Characters talk to each other during a battle. I think it's during in Sacred Stones, isn't it?
Yes.
Those are really interesting a lot of the time. And I really think Sacred Stones had some great supports, because you just learn so much about the characters. But you also probably will not see all the supports, either because people died or You just didn't put these characters together enough to see them all. So it's really cool afterwards to go read through all of them. And this is something else that I like a lot more about the earlier Fire Emblem games. The later ones, you like, when I say later, I mean Awakening and forward, just to be clear. With Awakening, you were able to marry people. And I don't have a problem with that in theory, but I didn't like how it affected the support conversations, because they end up being almost always really flirty and silly and stuff, because you're building to the A or S rank support where they get married. And so it's got to be believable, because that's what they're all trying to do. And it sort of established a pattern. Some of the ones just that I remember in Sacred Stones was like, you know, you might talk to Arthur the monk, and he talks about how just difficult it is for him going through all these battles and things. Or I don't remember which of the Cavaliers it was. I think it's Ford, that when you talk to him, he talks about how he likes painting, and he uses painting to sort of escape the battlefield and rationalize and process the things that he's had to do as being part of this war. And that's all that, you know, there's no undercurrent of like, well, I've got to be able to kiss you by support A. So we just don't have to think about that. And it really opened up a lot of other just character story moments that I really liked. Do you have any? I guess you haven't played too many of them, so I don't know if you have any opinions on that, or if there's any support that really just touched you.
No, I didn't really delve into the supports too much, other than when it would lead to like unlocking a character.
I gotcha.
Sometimes it'd be like, oh, if Nimi talks to Colm, he'll join your party. But if anyone else gets near him, you can attack him. Or, like, I would do a lot of those, but like I wouldn't necessarily too often go from character A to character B. Like I did more in the first game, the Blazing Blade. Lynn talked to Hector and Elwood.
But yeah, that's just something that I really like about the GBA games and most of the Fire Emblem games going up till Awakening. And there's still like things that aren't perfect, and I fully admit that. My favorite one, Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, they made it really weird with like Path of Radiance, you can only, I think you can have 5 support conversations with each character total. So you've got to like be really picky choosy, and I really didn't care for that either. But yeah, another theme that I thought was important to circle back on with the Ephraim and Erica sort of being together thing. Another theme that usually gets tagged onto that, and I talked with Daniel about this one as well, is their childhood friend Lyon, who they're trying to save. He has a little bit of a weird thing with Erica, and Daniel told me he picked up on that. But again, the joking, the fan joke / like there might be some truth in that, is that it seems like he wants to be with, like he knows that Ephraim and Erica sort of have a thing, and that he just wants to be part of that thing. And I find that really interesting as well.
I've also requested that.
Yeah, Daniel told me he doesn't really consider that part canon, which is fine.
Just in my head, it didn't feel that way when I played it, so it's hard to kind of remap it now.
Yeah, but you did notice the kind of weird interactions between him and Erica, though, you said.
Yeah, I thought that there was love interest there, not in any other sense.
Yeah, you told me too. I don't know if like I'm like calling you out or anything. You said you felt that was kind of forced too.
I thought it would have been more effective to just have them be friends. I don't know. It feels like everything nowadays is like everyone is couples, and like I feel like sometimes it's cool to just have friends. And like if it works well, fine. Just forcing it to be like, oh yes, we are in love.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I get definitely tired of all the shipping stuff that goes on. And like I'm just saying I'm not one of those people, and it's fine if you are, like whatever makes you happy. But I'm not one of those people, and to me, it's still the whole thing with Afro-America and Lyon. It felt to me like that was kind of there. So that's just my interpretation.
Yeah. Which if it is, fine. Like I don't care. But
some of the other themes I wanted to go into are just it kind of blows me away. Some of these things that I looked it up. This game is rated E, and I as I said, I felt like the incest things were implied. And we talked a little bit about Walter, doing all the stuff Walter does.
he's like the Joker.
Yes. Yeah, he kind of is. But then there's also the stuff with Orson that we didn't touch on too much. We did a little bit. But to me, that was just a very moving moment as well. A very horrifying moment that he, betrays you to have his wife revived and returned to him. And then when you find him and his wife, they don't show his wife on screen. You never see a graphic of her or a character design for her. But it's like all the characters, when they see her, are like, ugh, like, oh no, what did you do? Like, it's like an atrocity. It doesn't look human really anymore. And all she talks, I think all she says is like the words "yes, dear" over and over. And it's just a really dark moment that Orson goes from this proud paladin to, and they change his portrait as well. That he goes from this proud paladin to this guy that just kind of stares blankly into the distance and has this awful zombie wife that he takes care of, and is just crazy to me that that's in an E-rated Nintendo game for the Game Boy Advance, I guess.
Have you seen Full Metal Alchemist?
Not fully, but a good chunk of it.
So it is almost like a homunculus.
Yeah, sort of. But like to me, it reminds me more of when Alfred and or whatever their names are, Al and Ed. Yeah, when they bring their mom back in the beginning and they fail, and it's just sort of this like it moves like it slightly resembles a person, but I don't know if you could call it a real person. It's just sort of this unnatural creation. And I thought it was really interesting that Orson kind of is ruled by this. He allows himself to be ruled by this.
It's really depressing. If you like, the more I think about it, it's just
yeah, it really is. But it's interesting, and it's something that you don't see too much in games. And the only other thing, there's another Fire Emblem game that touches on something I think a little bit similar, but I won't talk about that here. But this definitely stands out as a very unique moment in the whole franchise to me. And I think it does make it hurt even more that you don't have Orson for too long, but you have him for long enough that it's like, well, that's your friend, and this is what's happened to him. And they're, like we talked about earlier, you can't recruit him back to your side. There's no helping him, really. It just is what it is. He's made his choices, and that's out of your hands as the player.
It's like watching a car crash happen.
Yeah, you really want to do something to help him, but you just can't.
That was one of the better like head fakes that I've seen in a video game, where like it feels like it's building up to this person like a redemption arc. A very nice like pivot away from like an expected like, oh yes, I will get this character back sort of moment. Like I bought it hook, line, and sinker that he was going to be back, and you'd have Ephraim talk to him in like that later battle, and then he'd be like, oh yes, I've seen the error of my ways. I will now dedicate my life to changing it, which seems like a lot of characters are recruited by, I was doing this bad thing and now I have seen the light and I will do this good thing with you.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely gets a little bit stereotypical, and this fights against that pretty handily.
Which is awesome, because it's fun to have some, well, it's not awesome for the character, but it's fun to have things like that happen.
Yeah, it's nice that there's still surprises, and you don't know what's going to happen. And it's interesting when you play with things that the player thinks are certainties. Like once I get a character, well, that's it. I don't have to use them again, but they're going to stick with me, and that's just going to be that. And it's interesting to flip that on its head and be like, yeah, well, we gave you this character, and he might leave. You never really know what's going to happen.
I'm glad it happens quickly though, and not like 7 battles in, because then you spent all this time like farming them, and like that would like really grind my gears. That would annoy me. Like if I was like grinding this character and then they were like, "Oh, sorry."
There something that grinds my gears very similarly that I think is even worse is very light spoilers for Fire Emblem Fates. Fates, there's 3 different tracks through that game. You get half the characters on one track, you get the other half the characters on the other track, and then the third track, you get everybody. So the light spoiler is they have a plot reason that they kill off a character, and it's stupid. Like, it's really stupid. But it just irked me so much that this just reminded me of that. It irked me so much that the third route is supposed to be for the one that you get all the characters, and then they just pick one and arbitrarily take that character from you so that you don't have the full roster.
Yeah, that would annoy me also.
That was even worse.
Yes, that would annoy me definitely.
Themes. I guess another really important theme of Sacred Stones is MacGuffins. People call this game very much like the MacGuffin fire. We need to go get the bracelets that give us the sacred stones, which then give us the thing, and then we need to go get the sacred weapons, and we got to go find them all. And like, there's just a lot of tchotchkes that you need to go collect,
which I think works. The story makes it so it doesn't feel like it flows well enough in this. The tempo of it is fast enough where it doesn't feel like, oh, now I have to like go back in this other thing. Like, it flows well enough. Other games, like I think of like Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker for GameCube. Closer to the end of the game, you're like going back to like most of the locations you've already been to get this other thing that was hidden. Sacred Stones does a good job at like curtailing that.
You don't feel like it's too much of a chore to go get the thing.
No, it's in the story enough. Doesn't feel like a side quest to make the game longer.
Yeah, I agree. Unlike, how do you feel about the route split? You've only played it once. I've played it twice, so I've seen both sides. I might have done it 3 times now. What do you feel like you missed out? Do you feel like you need to replay the game to see what happens on the other route, or are you satisfied with parts of the story you were presented?
I'm happy with the parts of the story that I was presented. I don't feel like I haven't really read what happens on Ephraim's route. It seems like it might be filler to go that route because of like the way the story presents itself. Like, I'm sure it probably isn't. I'm sure some interesting things happen, or things happen in a different manner than they would on the Erica route. I don't feel like cheated out of gameplay or a strong need to go back because I have to play the Ephraim route. Like, I was very contented with what I had received.
And yeah, I don't feel like you missed very much either. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings on games that you can't you're planning so that I cannot experience the full game in one playthrough. And most of the Fire Emblem games are not that way as well. And they've definitely jumped into it more with things like Fates and Three Houses. But most of them are still not that way. Most of them you can see all there is to see the very first time if you did everything perfectly properly and you got every character. Like, it's all possible. I don't hate it fully either, because it does give you an incentive to go through it again. And if you enjoy playing the game, then it's nice. It keeps things a little fresher. Like, I don't know.
Just thinking about how the story plays out, I haven't looked it up, so I don't know, but it seems like whatever is happening to Ephraim while things are happening to Erica, not enough happens to the point where Ephraim leaves and you see Ephraim again, that like anything of that much consequence could happen. You would know more than I would, though.
No, I'd say that it's not too much.
Mm-hmm. It's like a couple of battles different, so like how wildly different can it be? Would be, I guess, be my thought.
Yeah. I used to think it was more. Like I said, I fact-checked myself during this podcast recording because I used to think that some characters were route locked because I just knew, like, I played Ephraim's route first, and then I knew I got Cormag on that route, and I knew how I did it. But then with Erica, I think I didn't get Cormag because you had to do something else, and I kept waiting to do it the same way, and you don't go to that level. And then when Ephraim shows up and rejoins you, Cormag is not with him. So I'm like, okay, so Ephraim probably saw him because I saw him on Ephraim's route and just killed him or something. Like that was my assumption there. Apparently that's not the case, though.
I guess not. So I didn't get a chance to listen to the music during the game because I was mostly like playing in between work and stuff. So what did you think of the music for the game? Is it worth kind of going back and checking out?
I'd say so. I think that, like, Fire Emblem consistently has really good music. And even the Fire Emblem games that I don't like as much and I put towards the bottom of my list, their soundtrack is still usually fantastic. So I definitely say it's worth it. You don't have to fully play the game again, but definitely just on YouTube listen to some of the different music tracks because they are really good. I don't think that they're the best for the Fire Emblem franchise, but, like, I mean, putting it in context, is it better than a lot of other games? Yes. Is it better than most Game Boy Advance games? It might be the best of, like, Game Boy Advance music I've heard because there just wasn't a whole lot you could do with the Game Boy Advance's sound card.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, Pokemon has very great soundtracks, but I can't really think of any other, like, Game Boy Advance games where it'd be like, well, that's a great set of music, but I'm sure there are. But
yeah,
in the games I've played from Game Boy Advance, it doesn't seem like there's this huge list of, like, unforgettable music.
I would agree.
Again, more based on sound card than quality or anything like that. Just the limitations of what a Game Boy Advance can do.
Yeah, for sure. Graphics was our next point. Graphics I thought were really fantastic. I mean, you're gonna feel one way or the other when you look at, like, the sprites and stuff and the way that battle combat looks. They're a little bit more stylized than some of the other entries into Fire Emblem. But I remember when this came out, I'd played Sacred Stones and stuff, and I'd played Path of Radiance, so I had a pretty good feel for, like, okay, this is sort of the art style of Fire Emblem. And then the DS version of Shadow Dragon came out, which is a remake of the very first Fire Emblem game. And they tried to, with the DS's graphics, go a lot more realistic with it. The DS was just not capable of that. So I remember playing Shadow Dragon and just thinking, wow, I really miss the animations from Sacred Stones. How did you feel about them?
I thought they were very good. They're basically the same as the Blazing Blade for Game Boy Advance, so they're very similar. I
believe that it's all three of the Game Boy Advance ones are on the same engine, I think.
Mm-hmm. I would assume it's, if it's not, they definitely were very heavy-handed in keeping the animations very similar. I think it's perfect for the story they're trying to tell. I think they did a really good job making the characters, like, interesting and fun and, like, making you, like, want to, like, collect them and have them on your team other than Kyle. I don't know. I don't know. I don't, like, hate Kyle. He's just kind of boring.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think there's always, like, in Fire Emblem, there's, like, one character or two that you're just, like, really on. Mine, who am I the most on in the entire cast that I'm just like, whatever. There's a playability, like, maybe Nimai, the archer girl that you get really early. Like, I've just either her or Vanessa, because I don't like Pegasus Knights. I was just really on both of them. Yeah, I think that's the only two that I'm really extra on.
Amelia's really bad.
But I like that you can build her into something better.
Can you?
I mean, you can if you grind with her a pretty ridiculous extent, and really, I guess that could be said for anybody. But like Ross and Ewan, I like that she's one of the 3 like children characters that she essentially, because she starts as like a trainee, she gets 10 more levels than anybody else to grow. She has the potential, if you're gonna grind everybody up as much as you can, that she can be 10 level ups ahead by the end of everybody else.
Okay. I think she may have been another one that I let die.
Her stat growths are also really good. Most of the children characters, the offset is that even though their bases, how they join you is worse, their stat growth is better over time.
So any other like wrap up closing thoughts about Sacred Stones?
Yeah. Just some of the other weird things I didn't know where to fit in anywhere else. A weird factoid I just know about Sacred Stones is that Sacred Stones is actually on the 3DS, but only if you bought a 3DS really, really early. That is the only way you can get it, because Nintendo put out the 3DS, and I forget what the price point was. It was something like $200 or something, and then it wasn't selling as well as they'd hoped at that price point. So after a really short amount of time, I want to say like 2 months, they dropped it to like $150. But they didn't want fans who bought the 3DS on launch to feel cheated. So they did what was called the Nintendo 3DS Ambassador Program. And you got to pick, I think 3. I don't fully remember. I think it was 3 games. Okay, here we go. I'm fact checking myself now. So it was $250 US before the price drop, and then they dropped it to $170. It didn't take very long. So if you signed up, you got, and you could pick things like Metroid Fusion, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, WarioWare, Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. There's a couple others. But that is the only way to get Fire Emblem Sacred Stones on the 3DS, and that also kind of kills me, because I would love a re-release of this game on the 3DS or the Switch now. We were talking off camera that I would really like it if they localized Binding Blade and then did like a physical Switch release of Fire Emblem the Game Boy years or something. And even if it was a $60 package, I think it would be worth it, especially with how much you have to pay for these games now. Let's see. Is there any other wrap-up thought about Sacred Stones? Do you have any?
My wrap-up thought would be that I think a lot of people should give it a try. I feel like it's disappeared more than some of the other Fire Emblem games has.
I'd agree with that.
As far as like playability, I don't think has disappeared for a good reason. Like, I think the quality is definitely there, just for whatever reason, the marketing muscle.
I can shed some light on that. I think it's because the 2 games that came before it are tied into Roy's story, and people really like Roy because of Smash Bros. And then the 2 games after it are tied into Ike's story, and Ike is like the most popular Fire Emblem character. It's just the one that like doesn't have any characters in Smash Bros, isn't really represented too much, isn't talked about that much. It just kind of is, and it's not tied to anything else. Mm-hmm. It's 1 game entry, and that's it. And there is still like arguments, and people have tried to assemble timelines of all of Fire Emblem and put them in a timeline, and I think that's really cool. And I do think there's a lot of validity to that, but I don't think that they fully had that in mind making this game. So it really is more standalone than the rest. So I think that's kind of why it's been a little bit lost to time.
Yeah, but I think it's time for it to be rediscovered. So if you haven't played Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones, give it a playthrough. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that it's not too long. Like, it's a good sized game. And you definitely won't feel like you're shortchanged and you didn't get a full story or a full experience. But if I remember playing it correctly, it wasn't very long. It just, you get in, you do what you're there to do, and then you're done.
I think it took me probably like 15 to 20 hours, maybe.
Looking into like some of the more recent ones, I already said I really liked different things of it in a different episode, but Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I looked up how just the amount of cutscenes in that game. I didn't nearly finish it, but the amount of cutscenes and how far I'd gotten was really mind-blowing. So I decided to look up on YouTube how long, if I put them all back to back, are the cutscenes in this game. And it was like 55 hours of just cutscenes. Yeah, it was insane.
Wow.
So when you're a fan of RPGs and stuff, and you're looking at, facing down modern games like that, 15 to 20 hours is just not that big of an ask.
Yeah.
And it's on a game that, if you can buy it in its original format still, is mobile. So you can play it wherever.
Definitely. All right. Well, that will wrap up our talk on Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. Stay tuned for our next episode.
Yeah, and if there's ever a episode that you guys really want to see, make sure to let us know. It might not happen if it's a game that only like you and one other person have played, but that also might be that Daniel is that one other person or something, and he's really passionate about it. You never know. So make sure to suggest whatever you would like to hear us talk about.
All right. We'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.
Bye.
The Turn by Turn podcast can be found wherever podcasts can be found. We kindly ask that you rate and subscribe. Your subscription would mean the world to us. Please help us build our community by following us at Turn by Turn Podcast on Twitter and Instagram.